Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, February the 25th, 2026. I want to talk about Andrew again. I know you might be rather bored of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, but he does have an interesting chart, and I want to look at his horoscope with particular reference to Mars. And I have just written a Substack article on Andrew's chart. There's a link to the article in the description. If you want to subscribe to my Substack, feel free. It really doesn't cost you anything. So if you want to have my sort of detailed thoughts on Andrew's chart, there is an article which you might want to read. But before I look at Andrew, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, February the 25th, 2026. So here is the chart for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as this chart is concerned, setting it for noon New York time, we have the moon at 22 degrees Gemini. So the moon is going to be in Gemini, all day long. And as far as, what it does in Gemini, well, the moon is making a trine to Mars. So we've got Mars at 26 degrees Aquarius. It's also making a square to Mercury and a square to Venus. So there are a few lunar aspects to consider. I think perhaps the moon trine Mars might be the one to focus on. It's a trine in air signs, and it's quite an expansive aspect. We might want to throw our energy into sort of ideas and being original, especially as the moon is also actually sextile Chiron. So the moon at 23 degrees Gemini at noon New York time, sextiling Chiron in Aries. And so, like with the moon trine Mars, it's encouraging us perhaps to be quite independent, to be doing things our own way. And if we have a particular view on something, perhaps we should be quite open about it. Sometimes it's okay to be controversial. And then those squares between Mercury and Venus, you could argue that they are not entirely relaxed. Moon square Mercury in particular can just be irritated. You can perhaps regard Mercury in Pisces as just wanting to just exist in one's own emotional space, but then sort of Moon in Gemini might want to stir things up. So those Pisces planets might not be entirely comfortable with what the Moon is up to, the Moon in Gemini. And it could be that there is a lot of mental activity, perhaps a lot of talking, but not everyone is going to appreciate it. Now, one thing about Mercury, it's starting to go very, very slowly, very, very slowly, because it's about to go retrograde. I think it's tomorrow that Mercury goes retrograde, and of course in my video for tomorrow, Thursday, I will be spending some time talking about this retrograde Mercury and what it might mean. If you're someone who does take Mercury retrograde seriously, particularly the moment of Mercury going retrograde seriously, then maybe there are things that just need to be done before Mercury goes retrograde. And in this case, one might then want to think about that trine between the Moon and Mars. Once the Moon is trine Mars, well, that's it. That might represent a last chance, and then you might have to wait 3 weeks. I'm not saying you have to wait 3 weeks, because you should never forget that Mercury is retrograde a lot. I can't remember offhand, what percent of the time Mercury is retrograde, but people do things when Mercury is retrograde, and it works out fine. So you shouldn't necessarily sort of upturn your life and put everything on hold just because Mercury is retrograde, but it is certainly something to consider. And then we have Venus. Venus is Venus at 19 degrees Pisces is making a semisquare to Pluto, 45-degree aspect to Pluto. That's the sort of major non-lunar aspect of the day. In fact, you could say it's the only non-lunar aspect of the day. So if you've got Venus semi-square Pluto, that can say something about relationships. I mean, Venus is the natural planet of relationships, so if it's semi-square Pluto, there might be some difficulties, some misunderstandings, especially as the moon is making squares to Mercury and Venus. And there might be worries about who is in control, who has the power, and that certainly might be something that some of us might be. Also Venus semi-square Pluto. There is an obsessive side about it. We might be obsessing about Venusian things. Venus can rule money. It can also rule, what things look like. We might decide that something doesn't look very nice, and we might obsess about it. So, that's the broad picture for New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is still in Gemini at noon, so there's not a huge amount of difference. I mean, that moon trine Mars I was talking about, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, that's probably going to be more about tomorrow rather than today. In fact, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you could say that you're still feeling the first quarter moon. I talked about the first quarter moon yesterday, but it's still pretty much around for you, and there may be a certain crisis of action, feeling that there is something you need to do. It's a response to the new lunar cycle. We're still quite early on in the lunar cycle, again, especially if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia. So you've understood things, and now you have to perhaps act on them. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And we can now really see the heliocentric conjunction between Saturn, Neptune, and Venus. Saturn, Neptune, Venus, all in Aries. And Saturn is actually on the Venus-Neptune midpoint. So with all those planets coming together, Venus, Saturn, Neptune, that might say something about uncertainty. And we want things to be simple. I mean, Venus-Neptune, the Venus-Neptune principle. I mean, Venus and Neptune are still pretty close to one another, and things can be confusing. Other people can be confusing. Our own feelings about other people might be confusing. And with Saturn on the Venus-Neptune midpoint, which it is, you can see Saturn is halfway between Venus and Neptune heliocentrically, we might want to be in control. We don't want things to be complicated. And so there may be a great desire to make things as simple as possible. And sometimes, if we want things to be simple, we have to be quite harsh. The last thing we want is emotional complications. That conjunction may incline some of us to maybe distance ourselves from certain people, distance ourselves from people who have complicated emotions. We don't want too many complications, at least on an emotional level. At the same time, Mercury is heliocentrically starting to make a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. So today and tomorrow, Mercury-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer. Yeah, this is a heliocentric chart. Mercury is in Cancer. I know geocentrically it's in Pisces. And so with this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, that perhaps provides something of an antidote to the Venus-Saturn conjunction. So maybe it's saying that if we keep things at a fairly light level, a level of the mind, of communication, Mercury conjunct Jupiter, we just try to be sort of optimistic and we live on a fairly surface level, then things might be okay. Especially as geocentrically the moon is in Gemini. Also, Mercury is making a square to Chiron, And so that's happening at the same time as the moon is making a sextile to Chiron, so geocentrically. So the Chiron principle may be strong today, and with that being the case, we do want to stand out. We have definitely got something that we can contribute that is perhaps different from the normal dross. So now let me turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, February the 25th, 2026. Aries, you have a lot of get up and go today. Certainly on a mental level, you have a lot of ideas. There are things you want to say. There are ideas that you want to play with, and you can in your own way be quite dynamic. Now that doesn't mean to say that you have to take dynamic actions, and I think the emphasis is probably going to be more on your thoughts and your words rather than your actions. Now, as an Aries, you might find that irritating. After all, Aries is a very action-orientated sign. Action-orientated sign, and you want to be able to do stuff. But maybe it's just not a day when you actually have to do anything. It's just about saying what is on your mind, and you can speak with enthusiasm, and perhaps you have a chance to get other people going. You can at the same time create a degree of stability, because I think you're quite clear, and part of this is connected with the fact that Mars is in mutual reception to Saturn. Now, Mars has been in mutual reception to Saturn for some time, ever since Valentine's Day, February the 14th, when Saturn moves into Aries. But Mars is not going to be in Aquarius for much longer. I think it's on March the 2nd, which is going to be, Tuesday of next week, that Mars moves into Pisces. Now, there are certain advantages in Mars moving into Pisces. It's a good sign for Mars to be in. But, right now, while Mars is moving through the last few degrees of Aquarius, it is in reception to Saturn. And, this is a time when you can organize yourself, get yourself together, and in your own way, you can be quite authoritative. I mean, it's going to be quite clear through what you say that you mean business. And you, as I've just said, you don't necessarily have to actually take action. You don't have to take risks. You don't have to necessarily work on a physical level. It's perhaps instead all about sort of mental movement. I mean, it can be physical movement as well. I mean, it's a good time for Arians to perhaps move from place to place in a low profile kind of way. You don't have to be dramatic about it, but it's just going to feel good to have that sort of constant flow. It's almost a flow of air rather than fire. I mean, I know that Aries is a fire sign, but fire needs air. Without that air, the fire goes out. And so having that constant sort of mental action is just going to make you feel good, and so that is one way of looking at today. Now, there is a semisquare between Venus and Pluto. Now, this Venus-Pluto semisquare, I've already talked about it. It's quite could be quite intense, and it may relate to other people and relationships, and I think you can tune into this Venus-Pluto semisquare. So if you want to come over as being a powerful, intense person, you certainly can. And furthermore, you can be manipulative. I mean, Aries is not known for being a particularly manipulative sign, but if you wanted to sort of pull at the emotional strings, I think that is certainly something you can do. So that might have some relevance to relationships. So, in any relationship, you have quite a lot of control, perhaps more control than you realize. Taurus. Venus is making a semi-square to Pluto. I mean, that arguably is the main aspect of the day. I mean, Venus is your ruler, and it's in Pisces. It's 45 degrees from Pluto, and that does mean, Taurus, that you shouldn't underestimate yourself, and you do have the capacity to really have an influence. That's Venus semi-square Pluto. So if you don't feel that you have enough power, then I do feel confident that you can actually do something about it, and maybe you'll have a natural ability to work on an emotional level if you can handle it, if that's something you want to do. But it is also true that some Taurians may feel that they don't want to get involved. Like yesterday, you might be aware of a certain separation between yourself and other people. You might be of a view that you're going to function best when you're on your own, or at least when you're not too close to anyone. And in fact, it might occur to you that some people are just too much of a good thing, and that you need to have some distance. But you don't want to have too much distance, because you can have an influence, Taurus. If you want to have an influence, it really is the case. And so the question then might be, how close do you want to get? And that is the problem. I mean, I think part of you, Taurus, is just concerned that if you do get too close to anyone, you might not be in full control. You might lose control. I mean, that could happen, or at least that's your fear. But I don't think you should be, so worried. I mean, I understand that nothing is simple, and that things can get complicated quite quickly. But still, you shouldn't underestimate yourself. And heliocentrically, we talked about a conjunction between Venus and Saturn, but Venus is moving away from Saturn heliocentrically, and that means that other people are going to be less of a problem, and so as a result, you may feel that you can be more interactive and have an influence. You can, and Venus semi-square Pluto gives you the ability to take control. Although, Taurus, you might be of a view that it's other people controlling you, but it needn't be. And with Pluto, there's always this issue with Pluto, which I talk about quite often, is that you don't quite know how Pluto is going to operate. Pluto can be about taking control. It can also be about being in control. And there's always that question with Pluto: who has the power? But I think, Taurus, it can be you having the power, and I don't think that you should be worried too much about losing control. Although with the moon making a square to Venus, there may be times during the day where you are thinking about money, and it might occur to you that if you handle someone in the wrong way, there might be a financial cost. But if you just keep in mind the financial dimension, you should be okay. And in the end, the moon does make a trine to Mars, and so Moon in Gemini making a trine to Mars, that's actually quite a practical trine, at least from a Taurian perspective. And with this moon trine Mars, I think you're going to be very good at looking after your own interests. And Mars is still in Aquarius. Aquarius is a sign in the Taurian chart which is connected with ambition, whatever it is that you want to achieve. And while Mars is still in Aquarius, take advantage of it. And so with the moon making that trine to Mars, then, now might be your chance. If there's something you want, perhaps there's a way of getting hold of it, using that Venus semi-square Pluto, using the capacity for manipulation which that Venus-Pluto semi-square represents. And don't forget, tomorrow, Thursday, I think it's Thursday, Mercury goes retrograde, and when Mercury goes retrograde, it might not be quite so easy, and we're moving into the late week, and then into the end of a week, and by next week Mars will be out of Aquarius and into Pisces. So maybe Taurus, at least in terms of your ambitions and perhaps money as well, it might be a day when you need to seize your chance. Gemini. I think Gemini, it should be, a pretty good day. I'm quite optimistic about today. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? I mean, I hope that I have a, great Wednesday. I mean, my sun is in Gemini, and this is always this question, isn't it? I'm sorry to change the subject, but I'm often asked, do you look at the sun sign or do you look at the rising sign? I mean, logically, one should, of course, when you do these 12 sign readings, these readings of the 12 signs, logically, you should look at the rising sign. That does make sense. But I am a bit of a traditionalist, and one should never forget that this whole 12-sign astrology, which really started, I think, in the 1930s, I think with the birth of Princess Margaret. I think it was the Sunday Express that started first sort of really, the British newspaper, the Sunday Express, that started sort of linking sort of astrology and the 12 signs. It was always done with the sun in mind, and that's logical, because most people in the 1930s, they didn't know their rising sign, and you wanted something astrological about yourself that you would know just by knowing your date of birth. So there is a long history, going back, nearly 100 years of using the sun sign. So I am a bit of a traditionalist, and although logically you should look at these 12 signs from a perspective of your rising sign, I think there's still a case for using your sun sign simply out of tradition. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not getting to the point. I do think that today, Gemini, whether you're looking at this from a perspective of your rising sign or your sun sign or your moon sign, I think Gemini, it can really be quite a successful day. After all, the moon is moving through your sign, and while moving through your sign, I think it is making some important aspects. It's making a square to Venus, it's making a square to Mercury, it's making a trine to Mars. Now, those squares between Mercury and Venus, might sound problematic. Squares, we don't like squares, do we? Well, squares aren't so bad, and particularly when you think that Mercury and Venus are starting to form a conjunction, and this conjunction is in Pisces, and Pisces is at the top of the chart in the Gemini horoscope. So with the moon making this square, you are challenged. You just had the first quarter moon, so that would be yesterday. Tuesday was the first quarter moon, and that was an important point in the lunation cycle. That should have been motivating you to work out what needs to be done. The lunar cycle has started. Get it together. And with the moon making a square to Venus, square to Mercury, think about what you can do. Think about what you're good at, and don't just procrastinate. It's important not to procrastinate. Tomorrow, Gemini, Mercury goes retrograde, and that is your ruler, and you might say with Mercury going retrograde, that might be sort of 3 weeks of putting everything on ice. I would not go that far, by the way, absolutely not. But some Geminis, might get sort of too caught up in this Mercury retrograde, and maybe things will be slower. I mean, they're already slow. I mean, because in one level, because Mercury is coming to a standstill, but still, you've got those aspects that I was talking about: Moon square Mercury, Moon square Venus. You've also got the Moon making a trine to Mars, and I mean that Moon trine Mars, is very dynamic. It allows you to really put your stamp on things, and you can do it in a way that is interesting. You are curious, and if you want to explore something and work out how you can integrate it into your life, then I really think you can. So you're not only able to think about your ambitions for the future, but you're also able to think about what inspires you. So overall, Gemini, I think that it can be a very good day. Cancer. So Cancer, we've got the Moon continuing its movement through Gemini. And Moon does not go into Cancer at all today. Whatever your time zone, even if you're in Hawaii. But tomorrow, the Moon will be in Cancer, and that's certainly something to be looking forward to. But right now with the Moon in Gemini, you might just want to just hold a steady path, not feel that you absolutely need to do anything. Just hold to what works, and if there is any pressure, I think Cancer, you can probably ignore it. Okay, maybe you can't ignore it forever, but for the moment, you can ignore it. Though, the Moon does make square aspects to Mercury and Venus, and these Mercury-Venus squares, there could be a feeling that something doesn't quite fit. That you might come across something which contradicts your view of the world. You maybe don't like it. It just makes you feel uncomfortable. But if you do find yourself feeling uncomfortable today, don't worry about it. In fact, you should probably be happy. I mean, it's good having that feeling of discomfort, because it perhaps reminds you that something could be better, that maybe there is something that you need to find out about. So if you are in that position, and there is this question of knowledge, should you be finding out more about something, then I think the answer is definitely yes. I mean, don't restrict the information, and if someone starts talking, let them finish, and you might learn something, and you might gain useful information about a matter of some importance. And the Moon also makes a trine to Mars. I mean, that Moon trine Mars, I would regard it as being quite a powerful aspect, but for you, quite a low profile one. It's not something that you necessarily want to advertise, and it could be, Cancer, that you can do something in your own quiet way that no one notices, but it could be something that's really important. And Cancerians do have a side to them that likes to be secretive, likes to hide things. And if you feel that something needs to be kept secret, then you probably assess the situation correctly. But it's important that you're able to just act in a way that is under the radar. Leo, you have your own power at the moment. I mean, I think you've had power, for a long time, and this is something that I have been talking about quite a lot. I've always sort of mentioned the fact that the Sun is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. It's always on the Venus-Mars midpoint at the moment, and as I keep saying, that gives you definitely a degree of charm and attractiveness. But today it may be particularly intense. There's just something about you that people can't ignore. And so if you're trying to get close to anyone, then I think you can. So if you feel there's someone you need to get on with, or be in touch with, then it might be that now might be a good opportunity, because there's just something with Leo that is just there, and you do have an intensity which is very real. And overall, Leo, I think that your social abilities over the course of the day are going to be quite good. You will understand the emotional environment very well. Right now, Leo, while the sun is in Pisces, your ability to understand what's going on emotionally is not just in terms of individuals' emotions, but we're talking about the collective emotion. Your ability to understand all of that is extremely good, and perhaps you're helped by the fact that the sun is starting to move towards a conjunction with the North Node. Over the next couple of days, that conjunction is exact, and I regard the North Node as being a very benefic influence, and this enables you to just understand the environment, and you know that a high degree of sensitivity is required, and so emotionally you are fine-tuned, and I think that this is going to really help you. And as I just said, socially things are looking good, and you just have a natural ability to get on with people, and to say things that people want to hear. I mean, I know you don't want to be sycophantic, and you don't want to just make people happy for the sake of it, but sometimes you've got to be reasonable, you've got to be diplomatic, and if you want to be diplomatic, that is certainly something you can do. Even when you're dealing with someone who is a potential threat. And I think that might be the case, especially from a perspective of your work and career. Things are good overall, but it might just be that something is bothering you. I mean, don't forget, Mars is starting to move to a square of Uranus, and you might be wondering about certain people's motivations. I mean, especially in a work and a business environment. However, I think that this is a situation that you can handle, and you can be diplomatic even when dealing with people who may seem to be rivals. Virgo. So Mercury is your ruler, and it is about to go retrograde. I think Mercury goes retrograde tomorrow, isn't it? I think that's right. It sort of goes retrograde, at around 22, 23 Pisces, and perhaps Virgo. It feels that you are already coming to a halt. Things are getting slower, and you're starting to realize that things are taking a long time. But just because things are taking slower and taking a long time doesn't mean you give up. I mean, Mercury's not retrograde yet, and even when Mercury does go retrograde, that is not a time to be giving up. It's perhaps a time for review, to look at what you've done in the recent past, have another look at it, see if you've made mistakes. I'll be talking more about Mercury retrograde in my video for tomorrow, but for the moment, I think that you need to do what you can, and I actually think you can do quite a lot. I mean, the moon is in Gemini. It's making a trine to Pluto, and that moon trine Pluto, not trine Pluto, sorry, trine Mars. So that moon trine Mars is I think quite effective, and I think that some of your Virgo attributes are going to be on pretty good form. Virgo attributes. With Virgo, I mean particularly with Virgo, there's always a danger when talking about Virgo that one uses stereotypical language. I don't know. It's Virgo's kind of has that thing, where people talk about Virgo and details and wanting to get everything right and being well organized. My apologies for all of that, but there is an element of truth in that. Only an element, though. And with Moon trine Mars, I actually think that right now you are going to be very good at sorting things out, making sure that everything is done properly. But you can do it in such a way that is interesting. It needn't be boring at all. The idea of reshuffling and thinking about the demands of the future and making sure that everything is in the right place, and that you're kind of clearing the decks, getting ready for Mercury to go retrograde, and you're going to do it very effectively, and also you're going to be able to do it in a way that I think is quite dynamic. Dynamism is a word that one associates with Mars, and the moon is making a trine to Mars, and you can be very effective. You don't have to be dramatic about it. It's just making sure that everything is done properly. But it is also in a way going to be interesting, and you're perhaps helped by the fact that you come over as being surprisingly authoritative. You can demonstrate your authority in surprising ways, and it could be today that you are underestimated to begin with. People feel that you're just on the periphery of things, that you're not really in the center, and then suddenly you demonstrate how powerful you can be and how authoritative you can be, and your authority can come from nowhere. And it just could be that you're just watching people, they're doing certain things, they're not doing certain things, and then you just suddenly realize that things aren't being done right, and you express yourself, and you express yourself, with great power, and with great authority. So that means, Virgo, that I think it could be a powerful Wednesday when you are taken seriously, and it's certainly a good idea to take yourself seriously, because if you take yourself seriously, then everyone else is going to take you seriously. And while you're doing it, while you're arranging things, I think in your own quiet way you can have a good time. Libra. Venus is, of course, ruler of your sign, and so we have to see what Libra is doing. And one thing that Libra is doing is it is making a semisquare to Pluto. Now that might sound like a minor aspect, 45 degrees. It's supposedly not at the same level as a trine or a square or an opposition, but I think the semisquare aspects really do matter. And with this Venus semisquare Pluto, it might feel today that something is pressurizing you. You'd love things to be straightforward. I think that's what Librans are looking for. Libra is, after all, the sign of the balance, and if everything is right, everything is in balance. Well, that's great, isn't it? Unfortunately, things are not entirely in balance, and you're aware of that, and it could occur to you, for example, that there are outside forces which appear to be weighing in on you, and what do you do about it? Well, what are these outside forces? They may not be outside forces at all. It might be something working at an inner level. Maybe you're being encouraged to take something further. Something. When I say something, what am I talking about? Yeah, maybe it's your higher self. A part of your unconscious is kind of feeling that things could be improved. That's Pluto talking, and Pluto wants you to make more of an effort to tune into the fundamentals of who you are and what you can achieve. So I think that just because you feel hard done by, or you feel nervous, doesn't mean to say that you should necessarily just look for a quiet day. You need to make the most of whatever it is that you have, and I think Pluto is talking to you. And Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto is in a part of your chart which really is very, very creative, and it's going to stay there for a long time until the 2040s. And so it's only just starting. But this Venus semi-square Pluto is. You just might want to do everything properly, by the book, avoid trouble. But if that means underplaying who you are, underplaying your creativity and your uniqueness, well, that's no good. So Libra, it is important that you make the most of what you have, and at the same time, Libra. I know that you're a very sort of sociable sign, or at least in a textbook sense, Librans are supposed to be sociable. But I think you're going to be somewhat wary of other people. Maybe you're still getting used to the fact that Saturn is in your opposite sign, in Aries. It will take time to get used to, and perhaps it takes time to get used to the fact that some people at the moment are quite strongly placed, and that will be the case certainly until March the 2nd, because until March the 2nd, Mars is in mutual reception to Saturn, and that can talk about strong people who clearly seem to have the power and have the strength. At least, let's say clearly, but at least that's how it appears to you. And aside from that, well, I must say that there is an advantage in solitude. I think that might be how some Librans feel. Other people just could be rather too complicated and rather too overbearing, and so creating some distance may not be such a bad thing. And additionally, it just makes things easier. Now, I should talk about what is most positive about today. I don't want to just focus on what's complicated and what's difficult. The moon is making a trine to Mars, and this moon trine Mars, it has an impact on Libra because it involves the air sign. So moon is in Gemini, an air sign. Mars is in Aquarius, an air sign, and of course it is kind of aspecting Libra, and so that moon Mars trine is emphasizing the point that it's important to tune into what you are good at, and to do it well, and not to apologize. And if you do take that approach, you may find some support. You may find some kindred spirits on the way. Scorpio. The moon is right now making a trine to Mars, and this moon trine Mars, I think, is an aspect that is certainly useful. It's about you feeling a sense of your own power, and this feeling goes goes deep down. It has an emotional side to it, and it's not the kind of power that you want to show off about. It's just fundamental to you, and you don't have to be in the center of things to be able to use this power. You can be alone. You can be right where you are, and you feel powerful and self-contained. And so you can create your own space, and you can create your own freedoms, and you just needn't worry about whatever else is going on around you, if that is the way you feel. And so don't feel you have to do anything that you don't want to do. And at the same time, be aware of your influence. I've said that you can forget about other people if you so wish, but still you can be influential. People are definitely going to listen to you. You seem to have this power that doesn't really have to be spoken about. It doesn't have to be advertised. You don't have to go to other people. It may be the case that other people will come to you, and it could almost be the case that you're a beacon of power. You're just generating something, and again, it's not obvious, but it's very real. And so, as far as today is concerned, there just probably isn't much on an active level that you must do. You can just be yourself, and you can feel your own power. And that moon trine Mars, I would regard as being a very sort of empowering aspect. But it's important, things happen at your level. Now, on a practical sense, it might be a time when you want to get involved with things which are slightly complicated. As a Scorpio, you can often deal with complicated things, and I think that's now something that you really can do. So if something is complicated, you shouldn't shy away from it. You have a chance to really understand it, and if you're undisturbed, I think Scorpio today you can cover a lot of ground, but as I've already said, you don't have to completely withdraw from the world. I think that you can have a real impact. Sagittarius. Other people might matter. They don't necessarily have to matter, but they could matter. The moon is still in. It's still in Sagittarius. It's still in your opposite sign, and so with the moon in Sagittarius, I think that you can probably benefit from other people. Give them a chance. You don't have to give them complete control, but you can just give them an opportunity to show you who they are, what they've got to offer. And you might be pleasantly surprised. And with the moon making a trine to Mars, you have your own contributions to make. I think that this moon trine Mars is going to allow you to be quite verbal. You'll be able to talk about the things that are important to you, and you can give the impression that you are quite enthusiastic. And so that is certainly something to focus on. Additionally, Sagittarius, it's a time when you should be thinking about new ways of doing things. You might, for example, be considering issues relating to technology. Maybe there's a kind of technology that you should be bringing into your life, but you had been holding off on it. Perhaps you had concerns that you didn't know what you were doing, that you were concerned about, what might go wrong. But, it's not a time to be worried about those kind of things. The future is here, and I think that it's a time when you can, very much benefit from a future. So, don't make things too complicated. If something is available, if other people are able to use it, then I think you can use it as well. So that is something that you might want to work on. And don't forget, as I've already said, other people are there. You can deal with people very well. Your conversational skills right now, are very effective. So if you need information, you just have to ask. And I think whatever you're looking for, whatever facts you need to get hold of, it's all going to be there for you. So in general, Sagittarius, I think it can be be a pretty good day. Just don't limit your horizons. I mean, some Sagittarians might. They might have a strange fear of the unknown. If you don't know it, if you don't understand it, then you should leave it alone. But I think you need to be adventurous. I think that is an important component of having a great Wednesday. Capricorn. It's true, Capricorn, that there are certain things that need to be dealt with. You didn't necessarily want to deal with them. You'd rather be doing something else, but some things just can't be avoided. And really, it's not much to be worried about. I mean, the moon is at the moment making a trine to Mars. I think that moon trine Mars is very constructive, and Mars has a natural sympathy with you. I mean, it is, after all, in Aquarius, and it's in mutual reception to Saturn. So with this Mars-Saturn mutual reception, with the moon making a trine to Mars, that does allow you to really accomplish a great deal, and you can get to grips with the details. The details might not seem very interesting, but once you're able to really get to grips with them, you are going to be able to cover a lot of ground very quickly. And don't forget about money. So Aquarius is a sign which is quite financially orientated from a Capricorn perspective. After all, Aquarius is a sign following Capricorn. You could say that Capricorn is you, and then Aquarius represents your resources. And so with Mars moving through Aquarius, in mutual reception to Saturn, I think Capricorn, you have a good opportunity here to think about what is yours, what belongs to you, and what you feel you deserve, and to sort of maximize your financial opportunities. I think that clever organization can make a big difference. It's not just what you do, it's also what you say and how you present the facts. And being a Capricorn, you can be really very, very organized about it, and I think that that's going to sound impressive. And while all this is going on, I do think that your social abilities are going to be pretty good. You're going to be able to talk about many different things, and you can sort of tailor your words to fit the person you're talking to. So, if for example, that there's someone who has a particular set of interests, you're going to be able to perhaps talk about these interests. That's what people want to hear. And you will have a certain sort of mental flexibility. So whatever it is that you and another person have in common, even if it's not very much, you're going to be able to find it. And so it could be, a great day for, making new friends, making new contacts, and yeah, if there's someone you want to, if there's someone you want to impress, then now might be your chance. Now, as far as work is concerned, if you're working, if career is relevant to you or business is relevant to you, there could be, a few difficulties, not necessarily direct difficulties, but there just could be just a bit of uneasiness. Not everyone is going to entirely get on with one another. It's going to be difficult to put your finger on what the problem is. But this is really specifically about your working environment. I've just said that I think your ability to converse is pretty good, and I think you can actually converse on quite a light level. And then what you don't want to do is to make things too heavy, again, particularly in your working environment. So if you are aware of these sort of underlying sort of power struggles and underlying uneasiness, then what do you do? Well, I think what you do is, you do what you do best, at the moment. And what you do best at the moment is find common ground. Even if you and someone else are at complete loggerheads, you've still got something in common. And I think right now, Capricorn, you're going to be very, very good at finding that common ground. Aquarius. Mars is still in Aquarius. I mean, I have to say this because, very soon Mars is not going to be in Aquarius. It's going to be in Pisces. I think it's Tuesday of next week that Mars moves into. Is it Tuesday? It might even be Monday, actually. I think it's the second. The second is a Monday, so Sunday's the first. Yeah, I think it might be on Monday that Mars moves into Aquarius. So but Mars moves into Pisces. So you need to make the most of it. While you've got this energetic planet in your sign, an energetic planet that is in mutual reception to Saturn, and again, as soon as Mars leaves Aquarius, it will no longer be in mutual reception to Saturn. So it's perhaps a time when you need to make the most of what you've got, because in a few days' time things mightn't be quite so easy. Okay, that's a rather negative way of putting it. It's not that things will be more difficult. It's just that an opportunity might go, and we shouldn't forget that Mercury is about to go retrograde. So that might put a bit of pressure on you. So as far as today is concerned, Wednesday is concerned, then maybe there are real things that you need to do, that you need to get together, and I think you can get things together today. I mean, the moon in Gemini, making a trine to Mars in Aquarius. That's a very sort of very dynamic aspect, and if you want to initiate things, you certainly can, and you don't have to be too apologetic. It's thinking about yourself and what makes you unique, and you focus on that, and you can make a powerful impression, and people are going to listen to you, and don't allow minor details to get in your way. For example, the moon is making a square to Mercury, square to Venus. That does suggest a minor irritation. Perhaps it's an irritation relating to money. Someone says, something can't be done because it costs too much. But money is a side issue. And in fact, it's possible that some people will use money as an excuse for not doing anything, for not taking action. But I think, Aquarius, you know better than that. It's not about money. It's not about spending a lot of money. It's just having the will. If you want something done, Aquarius, you very much can. You can make it happen. And additionally, you needn't take no for an answer. If you get negative feedback, if people are dragging their feet, I think in most cases there's a way of changing people's minds. I think you're going to be very good at changing people's minds, and it's a social skill. you can understand what's bothering someone, and you can address that issue, and you can make people feel safe, and because of that, they're going to be prepared to follow your lead. Pisces. So we've got a lot of planets in Pisces. We're about to get more planets in Pisces. We've got Mercury, Venus, and the Sun in Pisces, and of course, early next week, I think on Monday, Mars moves into Pisces. So Pisces has certainly got a lot to offer here, and you are in the midst of Pisces season, and so it's important that you give it your best shot, and that you don't get sidetracked, and you don't have too many doubts. I mean, there could be a few doubts at the moment, with the Moon in Gemini, Moon in Gemini square Mercury in Pisces, square Venus in Pisces. The way you respond emotionally might just be a little cautious. You feel that you can't do something, or if you were to do something, it wouldn't necessarily work well. So there could be doubts, and I think that it's possible that certain other people might encourage you to have doubts, but it's up to you to make up your own mind and to decide what is important. You mustn't allow yourself to be overly influenced by what is being said. And so if you can be relatively independent, I think today that would be quite a good thing. And also consider what might be able to assist you. Different things can assist you, and it might be that there are things that are just taking you too long, and the reason they're taking you too long is because you haven't been prepared to consider alternative methods. And it might be that there is a way to do things much more quickly if you were able to utilize technology. Maybe you've been in the past a little bit wary of certain technological shortcuts, but now might be a time to really think about them. I know Mercury's about to go retrograde, but just because Mercury's going retrograde doesn't mean that you should completely grind to a halt. You don't have to grind to a halt. It's Mercury going retrograde. And by the way, Jupiter's. I know Jupiter's retrograde, but just a reminder that Jupiter is starting to slow down, and Jupiter is not going to go back much further. Very soon Jupiter will come to a standstill, and it will start to go forward. And so it might be that things that have been on ice, perhaps for the last few months since the autumn, you're slowly starting to see movement. Maybe you don't want to see movement. Maybe you'd like things to stay as they are, but they're not going to stay as they are. And it's a time when you need to think about Jupiter and how Jupiter might be able to benefit you. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it is time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 32, which is duration. This is a hexagram which is about holding firm. You stick with something. You do not get distracted, and that's always good. At least it seems to always be good. I mean, we don't want to scatter our energies. We want to decide that something is important, that it's worth giving it everything we've got, and through our persistence, we get the rewards. At least that's the theory, but it's not necessarily the practice. And The problem with this hexagram duration, even though it sounds responsible and solid and consistent, is that it can encourage us to go about things the wrong way. And we have the bottom line moving. And with the bottom line moving, it's possible that we're seeking stability at too earlier stage. So when you've got the bottom line moving, you're talking about the beginning of something. And at the beginning of something, things are all over the place. We don't really know what's going on. But it's tempting to think, okay, this is the way it is. Let's stay firm. Let's hold on to what we have. And it can be about learning a new subject. You learn a new subject, you start learning a new subject, and you learn a few things at the beginning, and then you say, well, that's it, I know it all, that's the way it is, and I'm going to stop. But you've done it too early. Dare I say it, some people might take that view of astrology. Astrology, there's a lot in astrology, but there may be a temptation to spend, 6 months learning astrology, and then you think, well, that's it, I'm an astrologer, and there's nothing more to learn. But it could apply to anything. And so we shouldn't be expecting stability and constancy too early in the game. And so this might be a project that we're involved with where we want results quickly. We want stability quickly, but that expectation is really quite unreasonable. And then the fourth line moves. Fourth line is about persistence. We keep doing something. That's always a good idea, isn't it? But not in this case. And one of the sort of images of the fourth moving line with duration is about looking for something. Of course, it being I Ching, it might be hunting. In ancient China, you're looking for something in a particular place, and you look really diligently, you look really hard, but you don't find it. So, for example, let's say I want to, let's say I want to look for rattlesnakes. And, I'm in sort of Western Washington. I don't know why I would look for rattlesnakes, but if I wanted to look for Western, there's, there is, sort of a 60, there's a 60-acre property that I in the summer I go sort of pulling Scotch broom, just spend every Saturday pulling weeds, and so I go to this place and I could diligently look for rattlesnakes, and I'll see other snakes. There are lots of snakes in this place. There are garter snakes. You don't see them very often, but what if I really try? Well, the problem is in Western Washington there are no rattlesnakes, none whatsoever. They're in Eastern Washington. I will never find a rattlesnake in Western Washington. So that's the principle. You are looking for something, and you can't possibly find it because it's not there. It's just so it might be that you're looking for an opportunity, and you've just got it wrong. You can try as hard as you can, but you're basically banging your head against a brick wall, and it's not going to happen. Now that's the first state. Fortunately, it is the Book of Changes, the I Ching, so that does mean that we move to a second state with these two moving lines, and the second state we move to is hexagram number 11. Completely different vibe, this hexagram. It's okay, it's got a certain sense of sort of harmony. Duration sounds quite harmonious until we go into the details. With peace, it's real harmony. So it could be that, to begin with, we could waste a lot of time. Looking for security, looking for stability, looking for something that can't be found. Maybe banging our head against a brick wall. But in the end, we get a sense of perspective. and things start to move. Perhaps we understand the nature of a problem, and just straight away, just things get easier. And indeed, we can have a sense of peace. There's harmony, things start to move. And why is it starting to move? Well, perhaps in the end, we recognize what we're doing. We recognize what we've been doing wrong. And once we do that, things really start to come together. And now I want to turn to the astrology. And there's just one thing I want to look at, and that's Andrew's chart. My apologies if you are bored of Andrew, but it is an interesting chart, and I really want to focus on his Mars. Now, I have done a relatively long Substack article. There's a link in the description to the Substack article where I go into some detail about Andrew's chart. If you read the article, you'll probably think that I've missed something. I can't go through every single detail of his chart. There are a couple of things I wanted to focus on in Andrew's chart. I wanted to look at his relationship to his mother, his father. I wanted to look at his Sun, Saturn semisquare. I also looked at his Mars in some detail. And it's Mars that I really want to focus on. Now, what made me think about Mars was a comment I had, a few days ago from Venus Kazemi, speaker rising 2527, who quite frequently comments on my videos, and the comments often sort of make me think and make me realize that I've missed something out. So I was mentioning some of the issues about Andrew's chart, and in particular I think I was talking about Andrew's arrogance. And Venus Kazemi, speaker rising 2527, wrote, in Uranian astrology the MC is the I, the ego. His MC is in Aries, ruled by Mars. His Mars is at 28 degrees Capricorn, its degree of maximum exaltation. William Lilly wrote of planets in exaltation, it presents a person of haughty condition, arrogant, affirming more unto him than his due. So I do want to pick up on some of those themes. So thank you, Venus Kazemi, speaker rising 2527, for pointing it out. And yeah, I'll be looking at all of that in a moment. So as far as Andrew's chart is concerned, here it is. Let me see if I can find it. Here, no, I can't. So Andrew's chart, I should have got it. I'll have Andrew's chart here in a moment. Let me just quickly get it. So here he is. Okay, there is Andrew's chart. So I just want to look at Mars. Nothing else. Okay, when I say nothing else, there'll be other things that are aspecting it. Now, when you're looking at a horoscope, in a way, you should never just look at one thing in the chart and draw all your conclusions from it. You do have to synthesize it. So, if one was doing a sort of a full reading for Andrew, one would look at his Mars, one would look at everything else in his chart. You'd interpret all these things, and then you would sort of put it together, and you would try to create some balance. But I do think it's sometimes a good idea to just to look at one thing. So Andrew's Mars is at 27 degrees 19 Capricorn. He has a very strong Mars. And I think you could argue that Mars is the strongest planet in his chart. So, what is strong about his Mars? I mean, his Mars is in Capricorn. It's exalted in Capricorn. And as Venus Kazemi, speaker rising, pointed out, it's close to the degree of its exaltation. So, you have exaltations in traditional Western astrology, but you also have degrees of exaltation, and Mars's degree of exaltation is 28. So, yes, a very strong Mars, and that's just by sign. Mars also joys in the sixth house. There are certain planets in which there are certain houses in which planets joy. For example, the Moon joys in the third house, Saturn joys in the 12th house, I think the Sun joys in the ninth house, and Mars joys in the sixth house. So it's a house where Mars feels comfortable. And then you've got Mars as conjunct Venus. And that Venus-Mars conjunction is absolutely critical to understanding Andrew. And his Venus is a benefic. So Mars benefits from its proximity to Venus. I don't think Venus does not benefit from its proximity to Mars. So there are several reasons for thinking that his Mars is really very strong. So there are a number of ways in which one can look at this Mars. Now, what Venus Cazimi Speaker Rising was saying is that, I had said that one couldn't necessarily read Andrew's arrogance just from his chart, just because he's got Leo rising. And Venus Cazimi Speaker Rising was correcting me. So you've got here, Andrew has an Aries midheaven. We sometimes forget about the midheaven. We focus a lot on the ascendant, and we don't think about the midheaven. But yeah, he has his midheaven at 22 degrees Aries, and in one sense, the midheaven represents the way we move forward, the way we want to present it, the way we want to present ourselves. It can be ego development. It's what it is what we're moving towards. And so the argument would be that the ruler of a midheaven is exalted, and it's at 28 degrees, pretty much 28 degrees Capricorn, or very close. And because of the strength of the ruler of a midheaven, that can incline someone towards arrogance. The Lily quotation, an exalted planet can make someone haughty, and I think that's something we should be aware of. That Mars, so exalted, but of course that Mars might simply describe his mother. In traditional Western astrology, the 10th house is the mother, and Mars in Capricorn at 28 degrees Capricorn could be a powerful mother. And maybe we get further information from that by the fact that Venus is conjunct Mars. Venus provides a sort of a feminine influence, and so the fact that his mother was the Queen of England is maybe illustrated by that Mars in Capricorn. Even though Mars is a male planet, and the feminine side of it is perhaps shown by the conjunction to Venus. And so that's one way of looking at it. Now, if we think about what has been said about Andrew, one thing that has been said about Andrew is the fact that he has not treated his servants particularly well. Now, if you've got Mars in the sixth, most people nowadays, don't have servants. I mean, a generation ago, people did have servants. My grandparents, before the Second World War, had servants. I don't think they could necessarily afford their servants, but they did have them, and it was quite common, before the Second World War. But my grandfather, he was a country vicar. He was a Church of England priest, and he was somehow able to afford servants, or some servants. I'm not quite sure how he managed, but he did. Maybe they didn't pay them very well, but things have changed. Nowadays, you've got to be pretty rich to have servants, and so that Mars may say something about his treatment of servants. When we think about going back to this idea of, because the sixth house, the sixth house does rule servants. William Lilly, one of the questions is, how do you find a servant who has run away? You look at the ruler of the sixth. So So the 6 says something about his servants and those under him. And maybe with that Mars, that haughty Mars, that arrogant Mars, that's saying something about how how he is treating them. And maybe also, Venus conjunct Mars, it really, doesn't help. So that may be a way in which the Venus-Mars conjunction is manifesting. Now, the most important point, about this Venus-Mars, when we think about Venus-Mars, would relate to his sexuality. Now, from what I've read, he is he's got a high sex drive, and there's this story which certainly has been spoken of in a public way. So I think I can repeat it. The allegation is that he visited a brothel when he was 11 years old. I mean, that is an extraordinary thing. Someone arranged it or whatever. I don't know the details, but that is the allegation, and it's certainly been said publicly. And so, there's a Venus-Mars conjunction, and you think about, I don't know, people talking about dozens of prostitutes, in a period of a few days. That all links with Venus-Mars. I mean, Venus is a planet of female sexuality. Mars is a planet of male sexuality. You put them together, and that may be how the Venus-Mars conjunction is working. I mean, that is an extreme way, and we shouldn't forget that Jeffrey Epstein also has a close Venus-Mars conjunction in Pisces. So, if we deconstruct that Venus-Mars conjunction, you have got Mars, you could say, is him. Venus represents the feminine, and so that may say something about how he is treating women with Venus. So, as I said, Mars is strengthened by its contact with Venus. Venus is undermined by a contact with Mars. Venus is, natural significator of young women, and so Mars is right on it, and so that could be potentially treating women badly or objectifying women, perhaps treating women as being, in some ways, an object of his lust, and that does fit very well. And if you take this chart and you give it to someone else, if you're not a royal, if you're just an ordinary person and you have that chart, an ordinary man born in 1960 from a humble background, he doesn't really have the potential to use that Venus and Mars. He's not going to have servants. He's not going to have the opportunity to have I don't know, loads of women at his beck and call. But so he doesn't have that opportunity. He's not indulged. So it might be that because of Andrew's station and his privilege, there are certain things in his horoscope that just become larger than life, and they become almost a parody. And I think that you could say that Andrew has become a sort of a parody of his Venus-Mars, of that Venus-Mars conjunction. And what undid him? What if you like brought about his downfall? Well, his connection with Virginia Giuffre really did not help, and she obviously caused him, a lot of damage. And we've got the photograph of him and Virginia Giuffre. We've got Virginia Giuffre's allegations. Are those allegations true? Well, if they were completely made up, then why would he or his mother have paid her £12 million? So you would assume that there is something in them. So Virginia Giuffre's horoscope has a critical link with Andrew's chart. So here is Virginia Giuffre's horoscope, and Virginia Giuffre has her Mars at 27 degrees 18 Cancer, and she has a Saturn Pluto conjunction at 28 degrees Libra. So she's got a Mars-Saturn square. The Mars-Saturn square in Virginia Giuffre's horoscope, well, that certainly says something about the difficulties in her life. She had obviously a really, really difficult upbringing, perhaps not helped by Andrew. And she has committed suicide. And so that's all sort of Mars square Saturn, unpleasantness in the end, sort of death. She has that. But that Mars Saturn square is hitting Andrew. So if we put those two charts side by side, let's see, we put Andrew in the middle, we put Virginia Giuffre on the outer wheel. So there is Andrew's Mars at 2719 degrees Capricorn. Virginia Giuffre's Mars is at 27 degrees 18 Cancer, absolutely directly opposition his Mars. And you could say Mars was a male planet, so she's attracting someone like Andrew. And additionally, her Saturn and the Pluto are on Mars. So Mars square Saturn, Mars square Pluto. There is an angry person, and in a way, he had to meet her. Perhaps she was an instrument. Perhaps an instrument of his undoing, but her Saturn square his Mars, her Mars opposition his Mars, and also hitting his Venus, of course, has completely destroyed him. Has gone a long way towards completely destroy him. So she in a way has completely Saturnized his Venus-Mars conjunction. So all of the destruction and restriction of that Mars-Saturn square in her horoscope, has been channeled on his Venus-Mars conjunction. It could be, no other way. And so Virginia Giuffre, well, Andrew should have looked at Virginia Giuffre's horoscope before having had anything to do with her. If he'd looked at her chart and he'd been into astrology, I think she would have immediately recognized that she was going to be his undoing. But maybe there was no choice. Maybe this was just something that had to happen. Anyway, that's it. Those are some thoughts on Andrew's Mars. As I said, I have written a Substack article on Andrew's horoscope. Link is in the description if you want to see it. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.